Oh man, do I feel rejected. Kind of like these comics. Hey there, today I have a CGC unboxing video, and in this video I'm going to open up an order that I sent to CGC. It was a 9.8 pre-screen, and it contained 7 comic books. I had talked about this and mentioned it a little bit on my last CGC unboxing, where I had decided to send a couple of pre-screens in a couple of smaller batches because I felt like it was more economical, but also it motivated me a bit more to send more books off for professional grading more regularly. And what I mean is it was easier for me to find 6 or 7 comics that I felt were worthy of a pre-screen, as opposed to kind of using the old process of finding 25 books to send all together in a big stack where the comics are compressed in the box and they're stacked on top of each other. And I thought it would just make more sense to send a batch of 7. So I did this twice, and the first submission I sent back, it was 7 for 7 on those books, and I was very, very pleased with the outcome. I got my first 9.9 out of that. And then there's this submission. If the last submission was about as good as you're going to get, where you get 6 9/8 and a 9/9, then this submission here that is supposed to contain 7 slabs is probably not as perfect as the last submission. So I want to get these slabs out of the box and show you which books got the 9.8. And clearly, unfortunately, there are rejects in here, multiple rejects. So I'll show you which books got rejected and see if we can tell maybe why some of the books were rejected in here. Now, I have looked at the grades. I know which books got a 9.8, which didn't, but I'll leave a little bit of a teaser here to make it worth your while to watch the entire video. I have this theory where I feel like you're better off submitting recently released books or brand new moderns to CGC if you're going to do a 9.8 pre-screen, and save your older books for a standard submission or some sort of press and grading combo or whatever, but try not to mix them up. Like if I'm sending 7 books, try and send all 7 of the same sort of type, because I feel like it's the same grader looking at the books, and I think that CGC has graders that are specifically dealing with 9.8 pre-screens. I could be wrong, but that's kind of my working theory. So I want to see if this submission goes along with that theory, or if it busts that theory completely, and then I'm back to square one trying to figure out what the heck is going on there. Only one way to find out which books got the 9.8, and that's to open this up and show you which comics are now slabbed and which ones are still raw and sad from being rejected. So here we go. Okay, I want to start with which books got the 9.8, so we'll do the slabs first and then see which books I submitted that got the reject. And let's cover the grade. I really thought this was going to be an 8.0, but instead it got a 9.8. No, I'm just kidding. I sent these all to CGC because I thought they were all 9/8. Yes, in some cases you're going to send books that you don't think are 9/8 and you just want to get the grade. I get that, but most of the time we're all looking for 9/8, so no reason to cover the grade and pretend here. This book is Venom number 9, the first full appearance of Dylan Brock in a CGC 9.8 white pages. I was a big collector of Venom back in late 2019 when I got back into the hobby, and was immediately feeling that FOMO where I was like, okay, it seems like Venom's the hot book. We've got characters that are being talked about. We have Null, we have Dylan, and this Donny Cates run was something that I almost was forced to pay attention to. And now that this is completely cooled off, I'm retroactively going back and filling out my Venom run, but also getting the key issues in the Venom run slabbed here, and wanted to get this one, Venom number 9 from February 2019, slabbed here, the first full appearance of Dylan Brock. Okay, another book that was recently released. This one was from June of 2022. This is New Mutants number 25. This is the Stanley Artgerm Lao variant cover. This is a 1 in 50. There is also a 1 in 100 that is a full art version, so no trade anywhere, no issue number, and so forth. So this is kind of an odd one. There seems to be a lot of randomness with the incentives and things like that these days, where you've got sometimes a cover like this being open order, and then there's some sort of ratio, a 25, a 50, or a 100, that is the full art version. But in this case, this is the 1 in 25, and then there is a full art on top of that in a 1 in 100. But I think for me at this point, I'm just a buyer on all things Artgerm. I just really have a hard time passing up anything that he does. And this book I picked up from Things from Another World, kind of a holdover from my TFA pre-ordering days before I switched to Dark Dominion Comics, where I was able to add retailer incentives to my pre-order using TFA, and this was one of them. So adding this to my Artgerm collection, New Mutants number 25 from June 2022. One thing I'll mention too, I didn't mention this in the last CGC unboxing video, but in these 9/8 pre-screens, none of these books were pressed. So I didn't have whatever it's called now, CGC pressing. I didn't have a third party touch these books. And it is part of one of my 4 CGC submission queues that I sort of operate. And I'm saying this like there's some crazy operation. It's just me deciding how I'm going to send books to CGC. But one of my queues that I keep are books that I feel I have personally pre-screened as a 9.8 and that I want to send in as part of that 9.8 pre-screen. My other queues are moderns that need, I would say, just a basic quick pressed or a touch-up of some kind that I would probably submit to CGC also as a 9.8 pre-screen. Then I have books that need a press that I would send through a regular submission, not a pre-screen. And lastly, I have a queue of books that need professional cleaning and pressing, something that I feel like is above my skill level. So these 9.8 pre-screens are books that I felt were a 9.8. Clearly wrong here as I get to the rejects here momentarily, but 2 more slabs to go. And the next one here is a book that came out in April of 2023, and this is Scarlet Witch number 2, the Alex Maleev variant cover. This is a 1 in 25. And again, as I talked about with the randomness that is incentives, there is a 1 in 25 second print of this book that is a full art version. So no trade, no issue number. It's just, and I love the cover art, so I'll be on the lookout for that one. But I thought this Maleev cover was just outstanding and wanted to pick this one up as I was able to get this one. And when I looked at it, it looked like a 9.8 all day long, and was right about this one. And a little foreshadowing, we might talk about this one a little bit more here in a second. But the last slab, but not least, is one of the older books that I sent in. This book's from 1983. This is probably one of my favorite covers done by this artist. I talk about this artist all the time. And I would say that this book is probably in that entry-level tier. So if you are chasing a lot of his covers or his original art, anything that he has done, this I would put at that first tier of books that are easier to find, but I think still very nice and desirable in high grade. And this is Alien Worlds number 4, with cover art by Dave Stevens from Pacific Comics, released September 1983. In fact, this was probably the first Dave Stevens comic book that I picked up as I was kind of like falling in love with his art all over again. Probably within the last year and a half is when I really started to focus a lot of my collecting into looking out for his books and his covers. And again, like I said, this is what I would consider to be more entry level. There's still value here, but it was relatively inexpensive to pick up. I've been finding a lot of Dave Stevens back issues on Mile High Comics. You can sometimes find them on eBay in kind of a lot where somebody is, they understand what they have in terms of them being books done by a specific creator, but they'll just throw them all in a stack and say Dave Stevens Comics at a cheap auction. But I absolutely love this cover. I think it's gorgeous. This is something that I can't wait to put up on my wall. It is a wall-worthy comic book as far as I'm concerned as a Dave Stevens fan. But just for all of the nostalgia and everything having to do with this cover, it just hits on so many genres and absolutely love it. So even though I'm about to show you the books that were rejected, and I am disappointed in myself that for whatever reason I missed assessing these comics to get the full 7 for 7, I was super happy that this one made the cut. So, you know, it's not necessarily breaking my theory, but it is a little bit strange to me that the Alien World's got the 9.8, and then these books here in the reject pile didn't. So let me get the rejects out of here. They used a lot of tape, no tape pulls. Like, come on, CGC. So we're using like really hard brown masking tape here. So I'll have to cut through this without cutting through the comics. So let me get this open. Okay, so let me show you which books didn't make the cut. As I said, here is that Scarlet Witch book again. Scarlet Witch number 2, the Maleev 1 in 25. I was fortunate enough to get a couple of copies of these, and I'm going to look this book over and see if it is something to do with the press or what. The only thing I can think of as I look at this is that the corner up here, probably hard to tell, but right up there in the corner, we've got some whitening happening, so it's possible that there was just a little bit too much spine splitting, just a touch on the bottom corner as well, right in there. So it's certainly possible that it was just too much for them. Now I'm thinking of another theory, which is don't send multiples of the same book, but in the 7 that I sent previously, I think I had multiples, so or I had the foil and a regular 1 in 100, I don't know, but I have to go back to the drawing board of my theories. But this was an example. I sent 2 of the same books. One got a 9.8, one got rejected. So there is that. And then I think I've sent this book in twice, not this specific book itself, but multiples of this She-Hulk number 4, the Russell Dauterman variant. And I'm going to give this a quick once over. The only thing I can see here is there is a little bit of maybe some ink staining down here in the corner next to the barcode, right down in here, that it's possible that prevented it. This one's probably borderline, a little bit of a corner issue too down here. Yeah, it's possible that actually it's probably more of this corner than anything at all right down there. There's some whitening down on the corner. I assume that I just missed it beforehand and it didn't get damaged in transit, or how I packed the book, but this one was rejected. And then this other one, another Dauterman book. This is the Sword number 8 variant edition, featuring Storm and all the iterations of her costume, and giving this a once over. This one has a few non-color breaking ticks on the back. The front looks super clean, but this one's going to be difficult, I think, to pick up on the camera. But up and down the spine there are some non-color breaking ticks. I counted three that like you can't miss, like it's right there. So actually maybe 3.5 now that I even look even closer. So this was probably something where I examined the front cover several times, flipped it over, maybe saw a couple and thought, you know, it's probably reasonable, but the front looked so good and obviously didn't make the cut. So this would be maybe a candidate to add some humidity to work on that back cover. This one I sent in surprisingly like raw. It's hard to find, but if you do find it, it's typically available for like under $20, but in a CGC 9.8 has a lot of value. So that's why I sent it. I'm also trying to collect CGC 9.8s of all the Dauterman variants where he does this on the character art. So part of it was around the value, the potential value, and then part of it was around kind of collecting that sort of theme of book. But those are the 7 books that I sent in, 4 out of 7. Really tough, right? It's, of course, we all want a perfect submission every time. That's why we send in the books. I'm not necessarily disappointed. I'm more disappointed with myself where I'm like, I want to make sure that when I grade these books and I put the grade in, I add them to my collection and don't really look at them ever again, especially if I put 9.8. I'm like, if I want to read this book or display it or something like that, I'm going to get another copy or read it digitally, or I'm just not going to handle this 9.8. I've talked about this before where it was almost like a preservation thing where I've got a book that I like, it's in a 9.8. We're not talking about hundreds and hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars. These aren't grails, but it is around preserving the books that you like in a 9.8 as well. But I've got to be certain when I put that 9.8 on the book that it truly is a 9.8, because what I end up doing is I will come back later and I will do my analysis and I will find the comic and the grade and the value and say, this is a book I need to submit. I go and find it in my inventory and I add it to the stack that I'm sending in. Another lesson that I'm learning is before I do that, take it out of the bag and board one last time, even though I've graded it, and give it one more grade, one more pass over, because maybe for some reason I missed something or I just hastily went through the book at the time that I originally bought it. So there's some lessons here that I've learned, particularly around the 9.8 pre-screen. Now I do the pre-screen to make sure that these books aren't encased in anything less than a 9.8, because these books in like a 9.2, a 9.4, or even a 9.6, they're just not worth the value. You're going to end up selling them at a loss. And a lot of times, like that She-Hulk book, if that She-Hulk book is a 9.4 slab, sometimes the slab doesn't even sell. So you're stuck trying to sell it for like $20 or $25, but you could easily get your money back or sell that book at cover and just let it go at cover and just to get it out of your inventory. It's not so much around turning a profit as it is moving on from the book. That She-Hulk #4, I have several copies, so I'm not necessarily concerned. If this was my only copy, I'm probably thinking about it differently. But just as an example around collecting the highest grade and highest quality comics as possible, which is one of my missions or characteristics of my collection, is I don't want a lot of loose low grades or moderns that are probably around 9 to 9.2, something like that, where it's just not necessarily holding value in that specific grade. It could be a very cool book or desirable book, but I'm looking for high grade books to keep in my collection. So I'll have to think about what I want to do with the 3 rejects. I don't know if I could get them all pressed and resubmit. I don't know if that's financially a good use of my resources, or if I just mark them down as 9.4, 9.6, put them back in my collection as such, and try again with another stack. Let me know what you think about this submission. Are these the type of books that you submit in a 9.8 pre-screen? What do you think about the older book, the Dave Stevens book from 1983 that got a 9.8 in the middle of all of these moderns and new releases? Leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching. Happy collecting, and see you next time.